Panasonic, the heart of your system.
Hi guys, it's Silas from Kit Guru, and today I'll be taking a look at the Alpenfohn Brocken 3 Air CPU Cooler. So let's kick off with the basics. The Brocken 3 is a large asymmetric air cooler featuring a single Wing Boost 3 140mm fan. On paper, the Brocken 3 boasts some pretty interesting specs. It features 5 separate nickel-plated heat pipes for some enhanced cooling performance, and the cooler is rated for up to a 220 watt TDP. The asymmetric design is actually quite interesting as well, as offsetting the cooler means that the cooler, even with its fan installed, is unlikely to come into contact or come close to your memory slots. This means even greater compatibility for RAM, both high and low profile, a really interesting move by Alpenfohn. Available now with pricing from about £42.95, it's not quite a budget option when compared to something like the Hyper 212 from Cooler Master, and kind of sits in between the budget and enthusiast air cooling options, so it'll be really interesting to see how it compares. Opening up the box, you were first greeted with an installation guide and instructions, and a long Alpenfohn screwdriver, which will likely be required at some stage during installation. The cooler itself is packed away in soft cell foam, so it should arrive to you undamaged, and it's flanked by both the included 140mm Wing Boost 3 PWM fan and a box of mounting hardware and accessories. Mounting hardware is supplied for most current Intel and AMD mounts, and in terms of accessories, alongside the included long screwdriver, you also receive thermal compound to be expected, and 4 wire fan mounts. It's always really cool to see additional mounts included with air coolers, to allow you to add a second fan for a push-pull configuration, so this is certainly appreciated. The included Wing Boost 3 fan feels solid and features 4 anti-vibration rubber pegs pre-installed, and a rubber sleeved PWM cable which helps with the overall slightly more premium feel. The PWM cable also features a Y splitter at the very end, which is also a really nice addition, allowing you to connect a second fan to the same motherboard 4-pin connection without the use of a separate splitter. It's pretty cool to see that Alpenfohn have you covered for upgrading the cooler out of the box, only requiring the purchase of, say, a second fan. Taking a look at the cooler itself, to me it almost has a kind of classic car or sort of hot roddy sort of aesthetic. The asymmetric design definitely feels a little quirky and gives you an impression of speed, like the motherboard is racing off and the cooler is being kind of dragged along behind it. The cooler also features a brushed aluminium anodized top plate with a sort of pearlescent paint finish. In some particular lighting it came across a little bit blue, and in others it came across a little bit more sort of pinky purple. It's a really subtle finish which was actually really hard to capture on camera, but quite evident with a close-up look. At the top there's also a couple of speedy looking vents which add to the cooler's fast appearance, and a clean mirrored Alpenfohn logo. Overall, I think it's a pretty good looking piece of kit. It certainly carries a much more unique aesthetic when compared to other currently available coolers, but this is a little bit subjective of course. I really like the pearlescent finish, but I can see this being a bit of a deal breaker for those looking for something a little bit plainer, or a cooler that will match their colours or the colours in their system. The asymmetric design is also pretty intriguing when it comes to how the cooler will mount. So let's take a look at the installation. As with most coolers, this starts with the backplate. Setting this up is pretty easy. The side of the backplate that touches your motherboard is dependent somewhat on whether you are mounting for Intel or AMD, but once you have this oriented correctly, you just need to pass the 4 long screws through the backplate and secure them with the 4 included plastic clips. The backplate can then be fitted to the rear of your motherboard, with the longer screws passing through the mounting holes. 4 plastic tube-like pillars can then be fitted atop the mounting screws, and there are a couple of brackets which then need to be placed atop these pillars. 4 thumb screws can then be added to hold the whole mounting mechanism together. The cooler has a mounting rocker plate pre-fitted to the CPU block, so with the bracket mounted, you just need to add some thermal compound and place the cooler over your CPU. The included long screwdriver then comes into play. There's a small pass-through running straight down the centre of the cooler for you to access the more central screw, which is nice and convenient. And the second mounting screw, very easily accessible at the front of the cooler. With the cooler firmly mounted, you just need to add the fan to the front with the included wire clips and plug the 4-pin PWM connection onto your motherboard's CPU fan header. There are quite a few stages to the process, so it's definitely worth consulting the installation guide, but overall, a pretty simple process. The asymmetric design also makes total sense with the cooler installed. You have no issues whatsoever with RAM clearance, and with the fan installed, you still have quite a bit of space before you would come into contact with your memory DIMMs. With the cooler installed, it's on to testing. At KitGuru, of course, we have recently updated our testing setup, and now we test temperatures for CPUs on the more recent Z170 platform. For the CPU, we are testing with the Intel Core i7-7700K installed in an Asus Z170 Pro gaming motherboard. For memory, we have a single 8GB stick of Guile Evo X RGB for some added bling, and that's running at 3200 MHz. Storage is handled by a 120GB SanDisk SSD Plus, and powering the bench is a Seasonic Prime Platinum 650W PSU. When testing, we take a number of readings with both the i7-7700K's turbo locked in and overclocked to 4.5 GHz. The temperatures taken are all delta T values, meaning that we subtract the ambient temperature from the CPU temperature. More details on our full testing methodology can be found on kitguru.net. So, kicking off with the stock temps. With our i7-7700K locked in at 4 GHz, performance is okay. With the Alpenfohn Brocken 3 coming in just behind the Dark Rock Pro 4, only hotter by around about 1 degree or so. Idle temps do show a bit more of a gap, and it comes in a little bit closer to some other air coolers that we've tested, say the Cooler Master MA410P and the MA410M. Moving on to our overclock testing, with our 7700K at 4.5 GHz, results are very similar in terms of where the Brocken 3 ranks across the coolers we have tested. Still sitting close to both the Cooler Master MA410P and MA410M. Both load and idle temperatures are fine, although not the best we have seen so far. On the other hand, countering these slightly higher temps, however, is audible noise. Taking a look at noise levels under load really shows the Alpenfohn Brocken 3's strengths, as it's the second quietest cooler tested, coming in just behind the Dark Rock Pro 4 and only just missing out on that top spot. This basically is a bit of a trade-off, as in testing the Brocken 3 didn't necessarily provide the best cooling performance. It was consistently one of the quietest coolers that we tested. The included Wing Boost 3 fans are basically tuned for lower noise, however, as the speeds run from about 400 to 1050 RPM. So even at max speed, not super fast when compared to something like the ML120 Pros included with the Corsair H100i RGB Platinum, which maxed out at about 2400 RPM. This actually turned out to be a really interesting example of how much fan speeds can actually affect not only the overall performance in temperatures of a cooler, but also the audible noise levels. So to summarise, the Alpenfohn Brocken 3 is actually a pretty interesting piece of kit, for a couple of different reasons. For starters, it's pretty unique in its appearance, as it features this asymmetric design. This does make quite a bit of sense, saving you from the trouble of establishing RAM clearances, and also moves the cooler a little bit closer to the rear of the case, which will likely help your rear case fan exhaust hotter air straight from the cooler itself. In terms of installation, this also helps make the process a little bit easier, as really there's only one slightly inaccessible mounting screw, and even then, the pass-through running central down the cooler and the included long screwdriver help tons. Installation again, pretty simple, although with a number of steps which make sense considering the cooler's size and weight. Better to have it mounted properly than to sacrifice the mounting strength for quicker and easier installation. In testing, it also became apparent that although quite a large cooler, it does seem that Alpenfohn have intended that the Brocken 3 favour slightly quieter or silent operation over, say, performance. Temperatures didn't really strike me as being crazy hot, but it's clear that the cooler runs a little bit hotter than some of its competitors. This being said, considering the significant reduction in audible noise, it seems like a pretty fair trade-off if you value silence. Aesthetically, I think the cooler looks pretty cool, but I can see the pearlescent top being a bit of a Marmite point for some people. Overall though, if you're looking for absolute peak performance, this may not be the cooler for you. It operates well, but there are a number of coolers that we've tested and that are available today, which will offer much lower temperatures. And with the Brocken 3 priced at £42.95, there or thereabouts, adding an extra £20 puts you much closer to something like the Dark Rock Pro 4. This being said, if you're looking for a mid-tier air cooler optimised for quiet operation, the Alpenfohn Brocken 3 is actually a really good option to look at. So I hope you enjoyed this little rundown, a review of the Alpenfohn Brocken 3. Make sure to leave a like or dislike, and please leave a comment below letting myself know what you think of the Brocken 3. Equally, would you sacrifice some performance for better audible noise? Make sure as well to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and if you would like to receive notifications of new video releases, make sure to click the bell icon below. I've been Silas from KitGuru. and I will see you in the next one.